school and work, waiting for some fun while my boss acts like a jerk. Pro show afternoons, midnight sketch can't come too soon. Afternoon sketch can't come too soon. But at night I'm filled with dread. I know just what I'll do instead. Come on and follow me. It's time you see for Lorn and Apollo. Time to laugh and learn. Come feel the burn of what the fandom was. What random fun doesn't escape. Isn't it great? Late night with Lorn and Apollo.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. It is Tuesday evening, and we're happy to see you all there in the chat, getting settled in for the night. Our discussion tonight is going to be centering on villains, and we have a few that have been picked out of various types. Hopefully, we're going to be talking about what makes a good villain, what makes you root for a villain, because honestly, in a lot of ways, the villains are the most fun part of a story. If you don't have a good villain, you don't have a good story. Some of their motivations, some of what makes them compelling, and just kind of have a general discussion about that. Kevin Apollo will be joining us later on tonight. He is planning to be here. He's just running a little bit late, so we'll bring him in when he gets here. At the top of our talk tonight, though, I'm sure you've all heard about it, but sad news that Dolly Parton did pass away today at the age of 80. She was a really neat lady, fantastic country singer, entrepreneur, philanthropic soul, just an all-around great lady, and we all feel really sad that she's gone. Dustin, bringing you in on that sad note, how you doing?
Well, other than that sad news, I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to talk villains with you tonight, and I'm excited to have Kevin on as well. It's going to be a great show.
Yep, I'm looking forward to him getting here as well. I know that he's going to have a number of villains that he's going to want to talk about, so it'll be interesting to see who's on his list. We do have some super chats to get to before we get into our main topics for the night. The first one is from Chief William Schweigert for $5, saying, I once did a super chat about the Orville and a country music legend that appeared. It was Dolly. In her memory, please watch Season 2, Episode 12, and Season 3, Episode 8. I did get this message from you earlier today, William. I didn't have time to watch those today. I'm not sure when I'm going to have the opportunity to do so, but I'll do my best when I get the opportunity. Thank you for the super chat. And we have Mark Fields for $4.99 saying, ready for a phenomenal show. Positive vibes to you all. Keep it up. And then following up with $1.99 saying, rest in peace to the beauty and grace that is Dolly. Yes, and we do share that sentiment. Followed up by Juliet for £2 saying, morning late night live with Lorn, Apollo, and chat. And another from Chief William Schweikert for $2 saying, rest in peace, Dolly. We will always love you. And yeah, I never actually got to see her in concert or anything like that. But my personal favorites of hers were Jolene and the duet with Kenny, Islands in the Stream. So there we go. Before we launch into our news stories, Dustin, is there anything particularly interesting that you've been up to since Friday? Anything that you want to plug or talk about? Or are we just going to dive straight into the news stories tonight?
Oh, man. No, just been covering some Star Wars news over on my channel. We also had a guest on talking drums this past week. We just dropped a video tonight. It was another interview style with a friend of ours, a friend of the channel. He's got his own YouTube channel as well. That was a fun conversation, but he loves Star Wars. So it was fun to have him on. I'm a drummer as well. So we really hit it off. No pun intended. Talking drums and Star Wars. It was a great conversation. If you guys want to hear it over there. Other than that, no, I'm just been looking forward to this, talking with you. How about you? You done anything fun lately?
No, I've just been doing the typical home maintenance and prep stuff for all the various shows that I'm on. It's just busy work in the background. However, you did mention Star Wars, and that is another thing that we've been talking about a little bit behind the scenes. I did not get the graphics up for this. I should have. I apologize for that. But there was something that we did kind of want to talk about that didn't really fit neatly into a story segment, but that I thought might be interesting just to conversate about and see what the chat thought about it. And this is going to get a little bit tricky to talk about because it involves the trailer or the teaser that was released at D23 for the Star Wars Starfighter movie that'll be coming out next year, starring Ryan Gosling. The trailer or the teaser itself, I had seen an earlier leaked version of it that came out, but what I didn't know was that the version that I saw was truncated and was not complete, and the version that I saw was in pretty poor video quality. As it happens, there was another version of the trailer that leaked that was in a much higher fidelity and had the footage that I was not aware had been clipped. So part of the reason this is tricky to talk about is that I cannot show that trailer because it's leaked, but people have been online talking about it, and so I don't feel any need to restrict myself on talking about what was released there. So for those who are not aware, this is going to be a movie that is taking place after the sequel trilogy. Stars Ryan Gosling playing a character named Cade. I don't remember what the kid that he's got in tow, his name is, but in essence, the movie's called Starfighter. We know it's going to involve a starfighter, and in this teaser that was released at D23, you see this young kid who is in Ryan Gosling's charge walking into a garage, approaching a machine that's under a tarp. And the nose is kind of poking out under it. And he's taking a look at it, and Ryan Gosling comes into the garage behind him and says, "Didn't I tell you not to touch anything?" And the kid says, "What is this?" And he says, "It's a decommissioned G-17 Imperial Reaper." The kid says, he says, "It's the fastest starship ever built." And he says, "I've never heard of it." And he says, "There's a reason for that, kid." And then he covers it back up with a tarp, and you cut to a number of different scenes that are seen in the movie, including an environment of the type that I've never seen before. It's an ocean environment with these massive geysers that are all shooting up into the sky. But the main thing that I wanted to talk about was this starfighter that we get a very quick look at, and not a really great look at. And there's two reasons that I wanted to focus on it. The first is that he called this a decommissioned Imperial G-17 Reaper. And that pricked my ears because there's already a Reaper in the Imperial Starfleet, and it looks nothing like this starship. Now, the Reaper was introduced in Rogue One. It is the TIE Reaper, and it is primarily a troop transport, but it is also used in some of in the Squadrons game, especially as a debuffing ship, a support ship in flight. It has a lot of countermeasures for sensors and things like that. It looks a little bit like you have some tie panels, but they're not the traditional tie panels. It's kind of like a squashed waffle iron, I guess is the way that I would describe it. And it doesn't look anything like this. Now, what's interesting is that from the brief shots that you get in this teaser trailer from D23, the fuselage of the ship actually looks quite a bit like a heavily modified X-Wing. And that's my opinion. You may have a different one. It's larger than an X-Wing. It's obviously not a single-seat fighter, but it has a long nose on it. It has some back-swept wings that, while not in an X configuration, if you look at the design of the cockpit and the front nose and the way that the wings sweep back, I get a very X-Wing feel. And the reason that I think this might be important, and again, folks, this is all speculation. So take all of this with a grain of salt. But I've seen other people talking about this online as well, so I think we're all kind of on the right track. If you know your Star Wars lore and history, most Imperial fighters are produced by Sinar Fleet Systems, and that includes all of the TIEs. You've got your TIE Fighter, your TIE Interceptor, your TIE Bomber, the Reaper. If you want to get into expanded universe lore, your Assault Gunboat. Actually, I think that was a different corporation. But the TIE line is mostly Sinar Fleet Systems. X-Wings were produced by Incom, a different corporation. And what's interesting about the old EU lore is that the X-Wings were actually supposed to be designed for the Empire. But the board of Incom Corporation did not agree with Imperial rule, and so they leaked the designs and the early fighters to the rebellion, which angered the Empire, obviously, for supplying material to an insurgent group, and they nationalized the corporation and took it over. The board mostly fled, but they still would have been in possession of any prototypes that they were working on at the time. And Incom, after that point, ended up producing the Imperial Howl Runner, which you see in the Dark Empire comic series, sort of to appease the Empire, but it was a lesser ship. It had a number of flaws that made it not particularly effective against rebel fighters. They were still sort of tacitly resisting within. All of this to say, I have sort of a theory that this starship, this decommissioned G-17 Imperial Reaper, was an Incom design that the Empire was planning to deploy after nationalization of Incom, and somebody stole it. And I think that somebody, probably not Ryan Gosling himself, because the timeline is wrong, he would have been too young, but somebody that he knew stole it, and so the Empire was never able to produce it. Just a hunch. So I thought it was interesting. The shot that we got of the Starfighter in the teaser is not extremely detailed. I'm really curious to see what this thing looks like when we get a good look at it. One other reason I think this may be relevant is that the Star Wars logo that they're using to promote the film is the old school 1976-1977 block text Star Wars logo that I think also hints that we're actually going to be dealing with something going back to the past to move this story into the future. So just a hunch. We'll see where it actually goes. Anyway, our first story for the night. Former NBA player Enes Kanter ejected from WNBA game for wearing shirt defining the word woman. Former NBA player Enes Kanter Freedom was ejected from a WNBA game after wearing a shirt displaying the dictionary definition of a woman. Freedom was seated courtside at Wintrust Arena on Sunday as the Chicago Sky hosted Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. His black shirt read, "Woman, noun, adult human female." The message apparently angered Sky guard Natasha Cloud, who confronted Freedom late in the third quarter. After scoring with 1 minute and 22 seconds remaining, Cloud walked towards him while yelling and pointing. Freedom stood with his arms extended and stepped towards the court as Cloud continued approaching. Several Sky players and security personnel quickly moved between them, preventing the exchange from escalating. Although Cloud initiated the confrontation, security removed Freedom from his seat and escorted him towards the arena lobby. As he left, the former center stretched out his shirt to ensure that spectators could read its message. "This is unacceptable," Freedom reportedly told police officers before departing the building. Freedom later addressed the incident on social media. "I just got kicked out of a WNBA game for supporting women," he wrote. "Let that sink in, America." The Swiss-born, Turkish-raised athlete legally changed his last name to Freedom when he became a U.S. citizen in 2021. Arena officials have not publicly explained why Freedom was removed or identified any specific rule that he violated. A woman seated in his row told ESPN that he had only cheered during the game before Cloud approached him. Chicago coach Tyler Marsh nevertheless defended Cloud's actions and suggested that Freedom should have focused exclusively on the game. "If you come to a game, you should probably come to enjoy the basketball," Marsh said. "That seems pretty simple to me. I think these players deserve that and have earned that." Marsh also praised Cloud as someone who protects our team and protects people that need to be protected. Cloud did not speak to reporters after Chicago's 113-90 loss. The confrontation follows Freedom's increasingly vocal support for protecting women's sports. He recently joined former NBA player Royce White in declaring himself eligible for the WNBA draft by claiming to identify as a woman. Their move is intended to highlight the league's failure to clearly define who qualifies as a woman. The WNBA's new collective bargaining agreement states that only players who are women are eligible to play, but it does not define the term or provide a publicly available policy governing transgender eligibility. Freedom has also defended Indiana Fever guard Sophie Cunningham, who generated controversy after opposing the inclusion of biological men in women's basketball. During a recent appearance on Fox News, Freedom told Lara Trump that he considers Cunningham an American hero. In a Sunday interview with Fox News, Freedom suggested that both his support for Cunningham and his shirt led to the confrontation. According to Freedom, Cloud initiated the exchange by directing harsh profanity at him in front of young fans. I was cheering for my friend Sophie because when she shot that three, I put my hands in the air, Freedom explained. A couple possessions later, Cloud came back and said, "She's not going to sleep with you," and I was shocked. I was like, "Listen, I'm not trying to sleep with her. I think she's awesome. She's a good friend. But I think it had a lot to do with my shirt." Cloud and the WNBA have yet to tell their side of the story. However, the images from Chicago are difficult to ignore. A male former NBA player wore a shirt displaying the traditional definition of woman. A WNBA player confronted him, and security escorted him out of the arena while allowing her to finish the game. And from my understanding, they've also come out and said that they're not going to allow Ennis or Royce to play for the WNBA, but they have not explained their disqualifying actions. So this is going to get even murkier. I think they're going to be required to explain it. I don't think that they could just hand wave away and say, "We know what a woman is, but we won't tell you." So my hunch, I don't remember who it was that suggested it. It may have been Culture Casino. I don't think the WNBA is going to want to let go of this. I don't think they're going to want to concede. So my guess is they are eventually going to upgrade or update their eligibility requirements and say something to the effect of, "We will allow a woman to join the WNBA, but woman is defined as either a biological woman or somebody who is actually undergoing hormone replacement therapy. And in that case, they will require a minimum amount of time that you have been going through transition, and they will require some type of a blood test to verify that those hormones are present in your system." Just a hunch. I think that's the play they're going to try to make.
Well, yeah. I mean, either way, they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot with this whole ordeal. I've been following this along minorly, but I've been following along with it, and I don't know how they're gonna get out without looking bad in this situation. And the whole transitioning thing, my personal opinion, unfortunately, that man turning into a woman or whatever, it still has a long time of having different hormones, different build, different structure. So to even allow that is dicey at best. And I think the only good thing about this for the WNBA, and forgive me if this sounds rude, but it's good. It's press. They're bad news is at least news. They're getting press on this, and people are watching. But it is fascinating to see the development of it, and I am curious to see where they go with this and how it all shakes out.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an ongoing story for a while, and I think 40's Mandalorian's got a great point here, which is simple blood test for XX chromosome. Yeah, it's going to be interesting if they do try to justify it as saying, "Well, we're going to be looking for the presence of these hormones, but you don't look for the chromosome." It's like, okay,
Right.
how are you? That's just going to divert things to a different legal battle. So whatever happens, I think it's going to be fascinating to watch. They're going to keep trying to twist themselves into pretzels to justify what they're doing, but I don't think the center can hold. They're going to hold it for as long as they can, though, until they are forced to make some kind of a definition. And I don't think the public's going to be with them for very long.
No, it's going to be entertaining either way, though.
Our next story up for tonight is Lantern's executive producer Damon Lindelof claims nobody wants adaptations faithful to the source material. Lantern's executive producer Damon Lindelof has weighed in on the ongoing debate over Hollywood's treatment of established intellectual property, claiming that he doesn't believe audiences actually want adaptations that remain completely faithful to their source material. The comments are particularly notable given the massive creative liberties already taken by HBO's Lanterns, including the decision to kill Hal Jordan during the show's very first episode. Speaking with a Hollywood Reporter alongside comic book writer and fellow Lanterns producer Tom King, Lindelof was asked about the increasingly heated debate surrounding adaptations and fans who object when Hollywood dramatically changes established characters and stories. Lindelof described parts of that conversation as insufferable. "I love the frame on the question. I love how insufferable the discourse is, and at the same time it feels like it's such a vital conversation," Lindelof said. He argued that fans can develop what he described as a proprietary interest in protecting properties after spending years reading, watching, discussing, and investing themselves in them. But Lindelof then went considerably further. According to Lindelof, changing established material isn't merely something that sometimes happens during an adaptation. He believes change is fundamental to the process itself. "We all just have to acknowledge that there's a level of hubris involved in taking on any of this pre-existing IP," Lindelof explained. "But to your point, it is called adaptation." He continued by saying the definition of adaptation that resonates most with him is that source material is supposed to change and evolve. Lindelof then argued that creators effectively have a responsibility to take risks with established properties. "As a consumer and as someone who's making this stuff, there's almost a responsibility to take risks," he said. Then came the statement likely to raise eyebrows among comic book fans. "I don't think anybody wants to see you be completely and totally vigilant to the source material, because then it isn't an adaptation at all." Lindelof ultimately asked, "Shouldn't we be beyond this conversation by now?" There is, however, a gigantic difference between adapting source material and disregarding it. Lindelof's argument appears to construct a false choice between slavishly reproducing every panel of a comic book and substantially reinventing the characters being adapted. Virtually nobody arguing for faithful adaptation is demanding that Hollywood reproduce comic books panel for panel. Some of the most celebrated adaptations ever made changed their source material. Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy made significant changes to J.R.R. Tolkien's novels. The Harry Potter films condensed and altered material from J.K. Rowling's books. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man changed elements of Peter Parker's origin and supporting cast. Adaptation inherently requires decisions about what works in another medium, but fidelity isn't simply about reproducing every event exactly as it appeared on the page. It's about preserving the characters, themes, mythology, tone, and fundamental appeal that made audiences care about the property in the first place. That's particularly relevant when discussing Green Lantern. Lindelof's comments arrive immediately after Lantern's made perhaps its most controversial creative decision yet. Kyle Chandler's Hal Jordan is killed during the first episode. Lindelof himself admitted that he initially resisted the decision because he knew exactly how Green Lantern fans might react. Speaking about the twist, Lindelof told Games Radar that his initial response was essentially that they couldn't do it because audiences would hate them and the decision could feel gimmicky. Showrunner Chris Mundy eventually convinced him otherwise. Lindelof acknowledged that viewers who waited years to see Hal Jordan return to live action could understandably be furious about getting Chandler's version of the character, only to see him die roughly 50 minutes later. His response was essentially to ask viewers to wait until episode 8 before rendering a final judgment. "If you still feel like it was exploitative or unnecessary, or that it wasn't exactly what had to happen in order for this story to get told, then we deserve it," Lindelof said. That context makes his latest comments about source material significantly more interesting. Fans aren't debating adaptation fidelity in some theoretical vacuum. They're doing it while watching Lanterns dramatically reinvent the characters those fans showed up to see. There's also an interesting contrast between Lindelof's comments and the way Warner Bros. Discovery originally marketed the series. When production began, HBO released an official statement from Monday describing the creative philosophy behind the show. "The goal is to create something that feels timeless and grounded without sacrificing the magic of the source material," Mundy said in the official Warner Bros. Discovery press release. That's a much different message from suggesting audiences don't want creators to be completely and totally vigilant about source material. And while Lindelof insists that he and King approached Lanterns as fans, his comments expose one of the central tensions surrounding modern Hollywood adaptations. Who ultimately gets to decide which parts of the source material matter? Lindelof's career is also closely associated with J.J. Abrams. The pair famously developed Lost together, with the Television Academy recounting how Lindelof and Abrams created the foundation of the series and collaborated on its pilot. Lindelof would later work on Abrams' Star Trek Into Darkness, and his career has repeatedly placed him beside major established franchises, including Star Trek, Alien, Watchmen, Star Wars, and now DC. That makes his philosophy towards adaptation especially relevant. This isn't a filmmaker being handed an obscure property and trying to figure out how to translate it to another medium. Lindelof has spent a substantial portion of his career working with some of the biggest pieces of intellectual property in entertainment. And now one of the men helping shape DC Studios' Green Lantern adaptation is openly arguing that audiences don't want creators to remain completely vigilant towards the material they're adapting. Perhaps the strangest part of Lindelof's comments is his suggestion that audiences should somehow be beyond the debate. Why would they be? Studios continue spending hundreds of millions of dollars adapting established intellectual properties specifically because those properties already have audiences. The entire financial advantage of making something called Green Lantern rather than creating an entirely original science fiction series is that generations of consumers already know Hal Jordan, Jon Stewart, Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern Corps, and the mythology surrounding them. That existing audience isn't an unfortunate complication. It's part of the asset that Hollywood purchased. If filmmakers want the brand recognition, characters, mythology, and built-in consumer awareness that come with established intellectual property, fans are entirely justified in judging how those filmmakers treat the material. Lindelof is correct about one thing. Adaptations require change, but that doesn't mean fidelity is irrelevant. The real challenge of adaptation has always been determining what can change without destroying what made the property worth adapting in the first place. And after Lanterns killed Hal Jordan in its opening episode, that's no longer an academic debate for Green Lantern fans. They're watching Damon Lindelof and company answer that question in real time. So, I have a sneaking suspicion Hal Jordan's not dead. because of the way that Lindelof phrased his response to the outcries. Just watch the whole series and see if you feel the same way. This sounds to me like a setup to catch the murderer. Let's let everybody think he's dead, and then he'll come in the last episode for the surprise reveal. And then Lindelof gets to come out and say, "See, I told you, you morons." I could be wrong. I haven't seen the first episode, but it is the kind of hacky thinking that a lot of these guys think. They think they're being clever, and it's like, we've seen this story 100 times before. You're trying to capitalize on the shock value and then take it back for a big reveal and pat yourself on the back for being clever, when this has been done in stories through time immemorial.
Yeah, and it just kind of might make that whole arc hollow, really. They're just doing it to get attention on it, to get this conversation going, which, I mean, again, might be a good marketing strategy. But if you fail to deliver in the end, or even if that doesn't end up happening, you run the risk of really disappointing Lanterns fans and getting everything else canceled after the fact.
Well, and the other thing is that even if that's not what they're doing, killing him's even worse. you know?
Right.
And now here's my real take on the situation. I think there's a lot of people that are just embarrassed by comic books. They think that they're silly, and this is why they so go out of their ways. The same thing that happened with Star Wars. It's the same thing that happens with all of these properties. They want to be attached to something big, and they want to change it so that they can get their name on it and take credit for it if it's successful. But they don't actually respect the stuff because they think it's juvenile. They would really love to go out and do whatever their indie movie is, but they can't do that until they make a name for themselves. So like a barnacle, they attach themselves to something bigger and more impressive than anything they've ever done, and then try to leverage that to say, see, I've made a multi-billion-dollar movie, if they do that. Now let me fund my own project and do what I want to do. And it never really seems to work out. But in the meantime, they do keep tripping through all of these massive IPs that have massive fan bases and just piss everybody off.
Yeah, you'd think they'd have learned by now that this strategy doesn't work. Or, I mean, maybe it does. I don't know. Maybe it does get them the attention they're looking for so they can get their solo project off the ground. But it's just, you don't got to leave franchises destroyed in the wake. And yeah, it's just getting tiring. It feels like Star Wars again. It's not taking the respect of the source material that came before. And with J.R. Tolkien's work, The Lord of the Rings, they respected the source material. They did make a few changes, but overall it was pretty dang accurate to the books, and they got the heart of it right. So you got to be careful on how you deal with that.
I would love to see a real faithful adaptation of Green Lantern. Green Lantern was a comic that I didn't read regularly, but I always enjoyed it when I did. I do think it's a difficult series to adapt, and I can understand why they would be wrestling with it, because I think to do it properly, you've got to go with the whiz bang space cops cosmic aesthetic, and that's expensive. And in a lot of ways, Green Lantern is a little sillier than a lot of the other comic superheroes, just because of the nature of the power and how it can turn humorous on a dime, even though Hal was always kind of straight-laced. So I can see that there are probably difficulties in adapting it, at least in live action. I think they've done a wonderful job in the animated realm. I would just like to see them do something like that in live action. I don't think they have a good way in their heads to do it. It would just cost too much, is my guess.
Yeah, it might be why they're going so seriously toned with this one, especially coming off, the failure that was Ryan. Oh shoot, no, I'm forgetting his name. The one that came before the movie that bombed, almost ruined
Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds' career, and then even Hal Jordan in the newest Superman being more goofy. I could see them kind of trying to take a different approach to be like, no, this can be serious. Like you said, the animated series definitely did a great job with it. It's a fun series. It's got a lot of expansive lore to it, so it's not like you can't adapt it well.
DC, by and large, has done a great job with their animated shows, and Justice League Unlimited remains one of my favorite series they ever did. But I don't know. The tragedy of the Green Lantern movie that we got is that Ryan Reynolds was all wrong for the part, and yet so much of what they did for design of that movie, especially Oa itself and how they made it look, and all of the crazy aliens and the faithful adaptations of characters like Kilowog and stuff like that. It's like, this is how I want a Green Lantern movie to look, but you didn't give me the real Hal Jordan. Mm-hmm. and ultimately it sort of collapsed in its own, again, silliness. I think that Green Lantern is just a particularly difficult project for anybody to adapt, and it's causing them all kinds of problems. But I have a feeling this is going to be another James Gunn crash and burn, which is unfortunate. I'd really like something that they're doing to work.
And it's just funny too, Lindelof being attached to it. He was going to do the Rey movie, the Star Wars one. I just can't imagine. I can't imagine what he was going to do with that there. So maybe Star Wars fans dodged a bullet.
They have tried so many people on the Rey movie, and it's just going nowhere. There are still rumors that in Starfighter that where Ryan Gosling is delivering the kid is to Rey, and I tell you what, if they do that, they just take a shotgun to the whole franchise. It's like, you are not ever going to make us accept this.
Exactly.
So we'll see. From Douglas Nutt for 2 saying his work is better suited to the porcelain throne. Yeah, I think that's sadly fairly accurate.
Maybe that's where he does his work.
his best work.
His best work. Yeah.
Next up, we've got California AG Rob Bonta abruptly cancels Paramount merger talks, accuses studio of playing games. California Attorney General Rob Bonta has abruptly canceled a highly anticipated meeting with Paramount Skydance over its proposed acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery, accusing the entertainment giant of negotiating in bad faith and playing games. The stunning reversal comes just days after Bonta publicly indicated that he was willing to negotiate a potential settlement, and less than 24 hours after reports indicated that the two sides would sit down Monday in an attempt to resolve the antitrust lawsuit currently preventing the massive merger from moving forward. Now Bonta is the one walking away from the negotiating table. According to Reuters, Bonta canceled Monday's scheduled meeting late Sunday after accusing Paramount of leaking information concerning preliminary discussions held Friday. The California Attorney General's office reportedly viewed the leak as evidence that Paramount was not negotiating in good faith. Bonta subsequently told the New York Times that talks could resume if Paramount stops playing games. It's an extraordinary escalation of what was supposed to be the first meaningful opportunity for the two sides to find an off-ramp from an increasingly ugly legal and political battle. The timing is particularly noteworthy. On Friday, Variety reported that representatives for Paramount and California were scheduled to meet Monday to discuss a possible settlement. That development followed weeks of increasingly hostile rhetoric between Paramount CEO David Ellison and Bonta. Bonta has maintained that Paramount's proposed acquisition of Warner Bros. Discovery would harm competition. His office is leading a coalition of 12 attorneys general that sued in July to block the transaction. In announcing the lawsuit, the California Attorney General's office argued that combining Paramount and Warner Bros. Would reduce competition across theatrical film distribution, cable television, and employment within the entertainment industry. But despite that opposition, Bonta had publicly left the door open to a negotiated settlement. California Governor Gavin Newsom also recently signaled his support for negotiations. The Hollywood Reporter reported Friday that Newsom supported settlement discussions surrounding the lawsuit. That made Monday's scheduled meeting potentially significant. Instead, it won't happen. According to Reuters, Friday's preliminary meeting was intended to establish the groundwork for Monday's more substantive discussions, but details of California's potential demands quickly became public. On Sunday, Reuters, citing reporting from the Wall Street Journal, reported that Bonta was expected to seek significant structural concessions from Paramount. Among those potential demands were the sale of certain cable television channels and maintaining separation between Paramount's and Warner Bros. Movie studio operations. Then came Bonta's accusation. The Attorney General reportedly concluded that Paramount was responsible for leaking information about the discussions and canceled Monday's meeting. That creates an almost surreal situation. For weeks, Bonta has criticized Paramount for allegedly refusing to meaningfully negotiate. Paramount has responded by publicly urging Bonta and the other attorneys general to come to the table. The two sides finally scheduled negotiations. Then Bonta canceled them before the substantive meeting could even begin. Whatever one thinks about the merits of California's antitrust case, Bonta can no longer simply claim Paramount refuses to negotiate without acknowledging that his office just canceled a scheduled negotiating session. The reported demands themselves also demonstrate just how far apart the two sides remain. According to the Wall Street Journal, California is seeking structural changes that could include divesting cable channels and keeping the Warner Bros. Movie studio independent from Paramount's existing film operation. Bonta had already made clear that relatively minor promises from Paramount would not satisfy him. He has demanded what he described as robust concessions capable of addressing California's underlying antitrust concerns. That appears to put Bonta at odds with Paramount's position that the merger has already survived enormous regulatory scrutiny. Paramount CEO David Ellison has said the transaction has satisfied regulatory requirements across 68 countries, while the merger has received approval from the U.S. Department of Justice and European regulators. California and the other states remain the largest obstacle standing between Paramount and the completion of the Warner Bros. Acquisition, and time is increasingly becoming a factor. Ellison has dramatically increased the pressure on Bonta in recent weeks. As previously reported, the Paramount CEO has threatened to begin moving operations out of California if the states refuse to reach a settlement. Variety reported that Ellison warned Paramount could begin pulling operations out of the state starting October 1st if meaningful negotiations do not occur. The threat infuriated Bonta. He publicly accused Paramount of attempting to blackmail California into abandoning its lawsuit. But Paramount's threat is particularly potent given the ongoing problems facing California's entertainment industry and the potential economic consequences of losing even more entertainment jobs. And Paramount has another reason to circle October 1st on the calendar. The longer this fight continues, the more expensive it could become. Paramount has asked the court to require the states and Writers Guild of America to post a staggering $1.88 billion bond related to potential damages caused by delaying the merger. According to Axios, Paramount argues that it could incur approximately $1.3 billion in unrecoverable ticking fees as the litigation drags on. Those fees are expected to begin October 1st and amount to roughly $7 million per day. Bonta responded to the bond request by again accusing Paramount of attempted blackmail, arguing that the company willingly agreed to the terms of its merger agreement and the associated financial penalties. But regardless of who is ultimately responsible for those costs, the financial pressure creates an obvious incentive for Paramount to resolve this dispute sooner rather than later, which makes Bonta's decision to cancel Monday's meeting even more significant. There are legitimate antitrust questions surrounding the combination of two companies as enormous as Paramount and Warner Bros. Discovery. California is entitled to raise those concerns, pursue its lawsuit, and demand concessions it believes are necessary to protect competition. But Bonta's public messaging is becoming increasingly difficult to square with his own actions. He has blasted Paramount for threatening to leave California and seeking a massive bond, while also accusing the company of refusing to negotiate in good faith. Yet when the two sides finally arranged a meeting specifically intended to explore a settlement, Bonta canceled it over an alleged leak concerning what California planned to demand. Perhaps Paramount leaked the information. Perhaps Bonta has legitimate reasons for being furious about it. But if the ultimate objective is protecting California workers and consumers while resolving legitimate competition concerns, walking away from the negotiating table hardly moves anyone closer to that goal, and the stakes extend far beyond a corporate boardroom. California's entertainment industry continues to struggle with production leaving the state, while Paramount is openly threatening to take even more operations and jobs elsewhere. Meanwhile, Paramount faces enormous financial penalties as the merger remains stalled. A trial is currently scheduled for March 2027. There is therefore every reason for both sides to negotiate. Instead, the California Attorney General has taken a dispute that appeared to finally be moving towards possible compromise and thrown another grenade into it. For all of Bonta's complaints about Paramount playing games, Monday morning was supposed to provide an opportunity to stop playing them and start negotiating. Yet Bonta canceled the meeting. So this has all been really interesting, and I think Bonta has gotten a little over his skis trying to launch himself into some larger political position, because even Gavin Newsom is telling him that they need to negotiate and bring this to a close, because he recognizes if Paramount leaves, Hollywood is in major, major trouble. But this gets even more interesting because there's another story here, which is Paramount denies leak came from them after Rob Bonta cancels merger talks. The war of words between Paramount Skydance and California Attorney General Rob Bonta over the proposed Warner Brothers Discovery merger just took another turn. Hours after Bonta abruptly canceled a planned Monday meeting with Paramount CEO David Ellison and accused the company of leaking confidential settlement discussions to the press, Paramount has now issued a direct denial. According to Variety, Paramount said Monday that it was not responsible for leaking details from its discussions with Bonta's office and remains prepared to continue negotiations. Paramount has not been the source of the leaks of any of our confidential discussions with the AG's office, the company stated. The alleged leak was the central justification Bonta gave for canceling what was supposed to be the first substantive attempt to negotiate a settlement in the multi-state lawsuit blocking Paramount's acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery. Now there are two directly contradictory accounts of what happened, and Bonta has yet to publicly provide evidence establishing that Paramount was actually responsible. As we reported earlier, Bonta canceled a scheduled meeting with Ellison after representatives from the two sides participated in a preliminary discussion on Friday. The California Attorney General accused Paramount of violating the confidentiality of those discussions after details of California's potential settlement demands began appearing in the press. Bonta claimed Paramount had both leaked and misrepresented what was discussed. Not only did Paramount leak the alleged substance of settlement discussions, but they misrepresented those discussions, Bonta said, according to Reuters. He then accused Paramount of playing games and said his office would be willing to resume discussions once the company engaged sincerely. Paramount is now disputing that premise entirely. The company told Variety that it shares Bonta's concerns about the public discussion and inaccurate reporting surrounding the negotiations, but has assured the Attorney General's office that Paramount was not responsible for leaking the confidential information. Paramount also reiterated that it remains willing to negotiate a resolution to the Attorney General's lawsuit and argued that the merger would increase competition and entertainment output. In other words, Paramount didn't walk away from the table, Bonta did. That question suddenly becomes much more important. The controversy erupted after the Wall Street Journal reported that California was expected to demand significant structural concessions from Paramount in exchange for settling the lawsuit. Among the reported possibilities were requiring Paramount to sell certain cable channels and keeping the Warner Brothers movie studio operationally separate from Paramount's existing film business. Those would be enormous concessions and potentially strike directly at some of the strategic benefits Paramount is seeking from the Warner Brothers Discovery acquisition. But the fact that confidential information appeared in the press does not by itself establish who supplied it. Bonta publicly placed responsibility on Paramount and canceled Monday's meeting as a result. Paramount has now categorically denied being the source. Unless Bonta's office has evidence connecting Paramount to the disclosure, his accusation remains unfounded. That's particularly noteworthy because the canceled meeting was supposed to move the dispute away from a courtroom showdown and towards a potential negotiated solution. One major question remains unanswered. Which cable networks does California actually want Paramount to sell? The Wall Street Journal report that apparently helped trigger Monday's blow-up said Bonta was expected to seek the divestiture of certain cable channels as part of any settlement, but it did not publicly identify which network California has in mind. The combined company would own an enormous portfolio. Paramount already controls networks including CBS-related cable properties, MTV, Comedy Central, Nickelodeon, BET, and others. Warner Brothers Discovery would bring HBO, TNT, TBS, Discovery, Food Network, HGTV, and perhaps most politically significant of all, CNN. There is currently no public evidence that Bonta has specifically demanded that Paramount sell CNN. But given everything David Ellison has said about the political opposition to this merger, it's impossible not to wonder whether CNN could eventually become part of that conversation. Earlier this month, Ellison made the extraordinary argument that the legal battle against his Warner Brothers Discovery acquisition is not truly driven by antitrust concerns at all. He claimed it's about CNN. Ellison said he believes there's a much simpler concern underlying the opposition to his acquisition, whether critics trust him to control Warner Brothers Discovery's cable news network. I believe this fight is not really about market share, Ellison wrote, before pointing directly towards concerns surrounding the news business and his potential stewardship of CNN. That's an astonishing allegation coming directly from the CEO attempting to complete the largest Hollywood merger in history. Ellison is essentially arguing that Democratic attorneys general are using antitrust law as a weapon because they're uncomfortable with the possibility that CNN could fall under his ownership. Bonta has denied that CNN is driving the lawsuit. But even Bonta's own rhetoric has occasionally wandered into territory far beyond movie ticket prices and cable carriage negotiations. During the announcement of the lawsuit in July, Bonta warned that the merger could result in fewer journalists informing the electorate, according to CNN's own coverage. That sounds considerably more political than an argument about whether Paramount and Warner Brothers would possess too much leverage negotiating cable distribution agreements. And CNN has already become a sensitive issue surrounding potential settlement concessions. Earlier this month, speculation emerged that Paramount could potentially divest the network to get the Warner Brothers Discovery deal across the finish line. Paramount responded forcefully. A source with knowledge of the company's thinking told the Wrap that there was zero truth to reports that Ellison was prepared to sell CNN. CNN is not for sale, the source said. That makes the mystery surrounding California's reported cable divestiture demand even more interesting. Perhaps Bonta is looking at overlapping entertainment networks such as TNT, TBS, MTV, or other properties where California believes the combined Paramount-Warner Brothers portfolio would become excessively concentrated. That would at least fit neatly within the stated antitrust rationale. But if CNN eventually appears on California's list, Ellison's argument that the political concerns are actually driving this lawsuit would suddenly become much harder to dismiss. After all, Ellison has already publicly identified CNN as what he believes to be the backbone of the political opposition to this transaction. Now California reportedly wants him to start selling cable networks. Until Bonta reveals exactly which ones, CNN is going to be the elephant in the room. Both sides also have reasons to avoid waiting too long. Under Paramount's agreement with Warner Brothers Discovery, delays beyond September 30th can trigger approximately $650 million in quarterly payments, roughly $7 million per day, while the transaction remains unresolved. Ellison has also warned that Paramount could begin moving operations out of California if the dispute isn't resolved, while California Governor Gavin Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass have both publicly pushed for the parties to find a solution. That makes Monday's collapse particularly remarkable. There was finally an opportunity for Paramount and California to begin negotiating the structural issues at the center of the lawsuit. Instead, Bonta canceled the meeting over an alleged leak. And while the company says it remains ready to return to negotiations, the next move appears to belong to California's Attorney General. If Bonta truly wants to settle this dispute in the boardroom, as he has repeatedly claimed, Paramount has just publicly told him that the door remains open. The question is whether Bonta intends to walk back through it. And I think an even bigger elephant in the room is who is supporting Bonta. I think everybody thinks that he is using this opportunity to try and advance his own political career, but that means somebody's got to be bankrolling him because the Attorney General and the Mayor of LA have both urged him to reach settlement. We're only one step away from the Chancellor actually dispatching Jedi Knights to command a settlement to be reached. So I think somebody needs to be asking, is Netflix actually bankrolling this?
Oh, wow. Netflix. Wow, I didn't even think about that side of things.
Oh, they're bitter about the fact that they didn't get the deal.
Ooh,
that Warner Brothers beat them out.
Man, everything I've heard about Bonta. Okay, everything I've heard about Bonta, man, he sounds like he's just leveraging all of this for his advantage. I don't know if it's political gain or if it's Netflix backing him, like you said. I didn't even think about that side of things. But, man, he sounds...
I think the thing that here's why this doesn't make sense to actually launch as a political career. I think it made sense to get his name in the news, but everybody that would be supporting him in this have now backtracked and told him if we lose Warner Brothers, if it actually goes, if they move their studios out of state, we lose production here, we lose work here, we lose everything that we need to keep our jobs going, not to mention the tax base that these guys provide. He'll destroy Hollywood if they move. So it doesn't make sense to advance his political career anymore. And that's part of why I got to be asking, who's bankrolling this? Because if it's not to launch a political career, it's got to be for money. So I'd be really interested in seeing what Bonta's finances look like right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a few things, even with him canceling movies for tax write-offs, and that's gained him a lot of money in the recent years, even to the point where actors were calling him out. In the recent movie, that Acme movie that's coming out, I think one of the main actors called him out on it. That was interesting.
Well, actually, Midnight's Edge had a great story about that launched earlier tonight, where Variety, I think it was either Variety or the Hollywood Reporter, were saying that this was going to prove to be Zaslav's greatest miss. But they're actually sort of reframing the conversation in a way to try and make Zaslav look good. Zaslav was actually correct in canceling the movie, and there are various reasons for that. I would urge people that are interested in that story to go check out Midnight's Edge video that was released tonight about that, because it covers the situation very well and explains why this story, again, I think it was Variety, but it may have been the Hollywood Reporter, is disingenuous. But I think this is continuing to be an absolutely fascinating story, and I believe that Ellison's going to make good on his threat. There's no reason at this point for him to remain in California. And if he does move these studios, I don't know what happens to Hollywood. You got to figure that the other studios are going to follow suit, because it's becoming a ghost town.
Yeah, it's going to turn into Escape LA. That's what it's turning into, the movie. And maybe Bonta's, maybe he just wants to see the world burn as a supervillain.
The only thing that works for him as a strategy to me right now is somebody's got to be paying him. But I don't know. We'll see how it all shakes out. I do expect he's going to be forced to make settlement. I think he's just trying to draw it out as long as he can to force. I think it's Paramount to continue to pay the ticking fees as long as he can. They just want to bleed him, and I think that's the actual goal. Bleed them as much as they can until they can't keep this up anymore. We'll see. It's going to be fascinating to follow.
Could he be looking for the other side? Trying to play to the other side of the political sphere. Left to right. If somebody's bankrolling him on that side.
From Bonta? No.
Okay.
No, I don't see how that would work in any way.
Okay.
Because I guess, all right, in Bizarro world, I guess you could say, let's say Tennessee or Texas was urging Bonta to accept cash to force Ellison to leave the state to one of their jurisdictions. Let's go with this crazy theory. I guess if he's corrupt enough, sure, he'd accept the money, but he'd destroy Hollywood in the process, and I'm certain he would then be investigated, and all of that would come to light. Not to mention the fact he'd be enriching the tax base of his political adversaries. So I just don't buy it. He'd never do that.
Okay.
It's just, I just don't get his strategy unless he's being paid to make this as painful for the Ellisons as possible.
Okay. I'm a bit of a layman on this, so my apologies. I'm still learning about it.
It's fascinating, and I think we're going to get a lot more stories out of it. Next up, we've got Rockstar Games moves forward with GTA 6 gameplay reveal on Netflix despite leaks. Rockstar Games is not delaying its upcoming GTA 6 gameplay reveal in the wake of last week's leaks, although the studio is doing all it can to find the source of the leaks. Grand Theft Auto 6 is one of the most anticipated games in history, arriving 13 years after its immediate predecessor, Grand Theft Auto 5, and has been delayed several times before settling on its November 19, 2026 release date. Pre-sales have been strong, particularly with most customers pre-ordering the most expensive Ultimate Edition, and analysts predict that the game could make over $5 billion in its first week. But last week, a person or group called CyberLeak released a leaked gameplay from GTA 6 in an apparent attempt to curtail some of Rockstar and parent company Take-Two Interactive's most hated practices. In particular, CyberLeak's About page on its website cites 3 commandments it demands publishers abide by, 2 of which Rockstar and Take-Two appear to have broken with GTA 6. One about selling digital pre-orders, which CyberLeak says makes no sense because digital copies of games cannot be understocked since they aren't stocked because they have no physical form. The other is not to sell fake single-player DLC, which seems to include a bunch of GTA 6 content on the Ultimate Edition that, though available at launch, is only included in the $99 version of the game, not the $79 standard edition. But if CyberLeak were hoping its aggressive tactics would convince Rockstar and Take-Two to change course, it looks like they'd better think again. According to a Bloomberg article by Jason Schreier, Rockstar will not change its plans to showcase GTA 6 gameplay during an extended look that will stream on Netflix this Thursday, before becoming more widely available on YouTube. While this doesn't confirm that the studio won't change course on the paid DLC or going all digital, there's not much it can do about the digital pre-sales at this point. It does indicate that Rockstar isn't prepared to play ball with the leakers. However, Schreier reports that Rockstar is scrambling to find the source of the leaks inside the studio, describing their mentality as all hands on deck. The bigger problem for Rockstar is that this isn't the first GTA 6 leak. There was one in 2022 that spread clips and images from a rougher version of the game, which hadn't even been announced yet. According to Schreier and his source, Rockstar tightened security after the first leak to make sure it didn't happen again. Now that another leak has occurred, Rockstar may implement even more security measures as Take-Two pursues the leakers by subpoenaing Microsoft and Discord for any helpful information. Rockstar's decision to go forward with the GTA 6 gameplay reveal on Netflix may not be the end of the fiasco, however. CyberLeak claims to have a build of the entire GTA 6 game and is threatening to release the entire thing if Rockstar and Take-Two don't back off. With Take-Two pursuing legal action and doggedly hunting for the leaker or leakers, is this a case of mutually assured destruction or is CyberLeak bluffing? Until GTA 6 is fully released, or something dramatic happens, we won't know for sure, but Rockstar doesn't appear ready to blink just yet. I have been following all of the developments on this story as much as I can because I find it fascinating and I want PlayStation to burn. So, I have a dog in this fight. I generally am against piracy, but I do have a dog in this fight because I think that there are much more nefarious things going on behind this than what are currently being surfaced. So if CyberLeak does have a dead man's switch, if he is apprehended, if he doesn't check in, and this thing does leak, I guess I got a couple questions. One, how many people do you think will download the cracked copy of the game and run it and play it without buying it from PlayStation? And two, what do you think the legal implications will be? Because this will be one of the most consequential stories. Because it's interesting. We're talking about, it's difficult to call it theft, because theft involves the depriving of a thing from a person so that they cannot use it. But he hasn't deprived them of the thing. They still have it. He has made a copy of it and distributed it. Now, what you can argue is that he has deprived them of their rightful finances, but then you have to estimate how much money has been lost. And I gather that there's a formula for doing that, some of it based upon pre-sales, but the sheer volume of losses, not to mention the loss in stock price, which they've already lost. I thought I had heard initially it was $2.8 billion, but I've heard now that it's $2.3 billion in market cap. So I want to know what kind of example they'll make of if they are able to apprehend whoever this is, if it's a single person.
Right. Well, piracy is not a victimless crime, Lorn. I feel like you're going a little pirate on me here tonight.
Yo ho.
No, but I mean that would be crazy. I mean the only problem with that is the leaked game is is the final game. That's the thing. Obviously there's going to be updates and stuff like that. So I think eventually, even if a lot of people do download the game and play it, which I mean is one of the most anticipated games of all time, like GTA 5, I mean is still being played to this day because of modders and everything like that, which is crazy how big that game is. So I think yeah, you have a good point there with how much are they? It's not stealing, but it is taking away revenue from the company. But in the end,
there
go
is
ahead.
a measurable stock loss, and so they can at least use that as a baseline. I'm not saying that they have not been hurt by this. I would not make that claim. There is definitely a legal case to be made,
Right.
but it's like when we were talking about this the other day on Pro Show, it's like, but it's a financial crime. He's saying they'll put him in jail for 30 years. It's like,
Oh,
Pro, they let murderers out in 5 or 6 these days. So at a certain point, you've got to look at all of this and say, this is ridiculous. It's like if you're going to try and hit the kid for restitution, I'm assuming it's a kid. That's probably not true, but all right, he just declares bankruptcy. You're going to have to throw him in jail for a certain period of time, but it can't be for something like 30 years. So what are you going to do here? I don't see any way that they come out looking like the good guy. And they've already taken a giant hit to their reputation. They've already taken a giant hit to their stock. I I think the most interesting aspect of this story is I think because of the scale of the potential loss, if such a loss occurs, it may force lawmakers to actually pay attention and to take a look at what's going on here. Do we need to revisit consumer rights protections? Because I think that's where the real argument needs to be made here. These EULAs that you agree to are entirely predatory. Nobody ever reads them. There have been some that have demonstrated this point by putting language in there that says that if you agree to this EULA, then we gain possession of your soul, to make a point about the fact that nobody actually reads these. And it's weighted entirely in one direction. Now, you could also make the counter argument that, but nobody needs a game. So if you aren't reading the EULA and you're not paying attention to it, then that's on you. And I agree with that point as well. But the point is, I think what I find most offensive about all of this is the way that they're framing this is that you don't own anything. What you are doing is paying for a license that grants you limited use of this software, which you do not own, which can be revoked at any time, that allows us to limit damages if we make any mistakes to a minor sum. You have no rights whatsoever. And this, to me, you have to receive something of value for the transaction. And I think that they have tilted this so heavily to the corporate side that that's not happening. And to me, that also counts as theft. When you have when you don't when the language even includes, we can brick your console if we decide we want to do that. And if we do that by accident and you lose your entire library, or we suspend your account and it's a mistake, sorry, here's $100. It's like, no, somebody needs to look at this stuff to make sure that there are proper protections in place for what the consumer has purchased, especially if the little button on the store says purchase. You want to say rent? Maybe we can discuss it a little bit more, but I think there's a lot of misleading stuff that's going on here.
I completely agree. I think you've convinced me. I'm going pirate with you tonight. Bring it on.
All right. So we got one more story that we can cover before we get to the villains thing. That is, James Gunn once called Lanterns writer Damon Lindelof a scam artist and liar with no integrity. Long before James Gunn welcomed Damon Lindelof into his new DC universe to help create Lanterns, Gunn had a dramatically different assessment of the lost co-creator. In fact, Gunn once publicly described Lindelof as a total scam artist, accused him of having no integrity whatsoever, called him a liar, and even said he was close to Satan. The remarkable old comments have taken on new relevance following the premiere of HBO's Lanterns, particularly as Lindelof has openly discussed the creative team's willingness to make controversial changes to establish Green Lantern characters. The comments date back to March 2012, years before Gunn became one of the most powerful figures at Warner Bros. Discovery as co-head of DC Studios. While discussing Ridley Scott's Prometheus, which Lindelof co-wrote, Gunn responded to a discussion about the writer by unloading on him over the ending of ABC's Lost. And what he said was, Lindelof is close to Satan in my book because of the end of Lost. He's the Uri Geller of storytellers, a total scam artist with no integrity whatsoever, and a liar. As reported by Dexerto when the comments resurfaced in 2024, and then they quote the tweet, this is not exactly a mixed review. The comments were also reported by Comic Book Movie, which dated Gunn's Facebook remarks to March 18, 2012. There was some debate online after the screenshot resurfaced about whether the comment actually came from Gunn. Pajiba subsequently documented the dispute, reporting that while some initially claimed the comment came from someone impersonating Gunn, additional digging indicated it came from Gunn's personal Facebook account rather than his more public-facing promotional page. More than one outlet ultimately reported the comments as authentic. Obviously, something changed. When the Lantern's creative team was formally revealed in May 2024, Gunn wasn't merely willing to work with Lindelof, he enthusiastically promoted his involvement. Gunn announced that Lindelof, Chris Mundy, and Tom King were developing the series, writing, "Yes, it's true. The Lantern's DCU series is putting together a crack team of writers based on a wonderful pilot script and Bible by Chris Mundy, Tom King, and Damon Lindelof." He added, "A hearty welcome to Chris and Damon Lindelof as they join the DC Studios family." That's quite the evolution from total scam artist with no integrity whatsoever. People can obviously change their opinions over the course of 12 years. Lindelof also went on to create HBO's The Leftovers and Watchmen following Lost, giving Gunn plenty of subsequent work upon which he could have reevaluated the writer. But Gunn didn't simply decide Lindelof wasn't so bad after all. He ultimately helped put Lindelof in a position to shape one of the most important characters and projects in Gunn's new DC universe. The old comments became particularly fascinating in light of what Lindelof has been saying while promoting Lanterns. The HBO series has already generated significant controversy among Green Lantern fans over its handling of the source material, including its decision to apparently kill Hal Jordan in the premiere. Lindelof acknowledged to Games Radar that he initially thought audiences would hate the decision. "We can't do that. Everyone's going to hate us and it feels gimmicky," he said, documenting his initial reaction. Lindelof eventually embraced the idea and acknowledged that some fans would be furious. He argued that viewers should wait until the 8th episode before deciding whether the decision was exploitative or unnecessary. Meanwhile, Lindelof has also pushed back on the idea that there is one definitive way to satisfy fans when adapting established material. Speaking about the reaction to Lanterns, Lindelof told Variety that fandom itself isn't uniform, and argued that some fans want revisionist storytelling while others simply want to see what they already love faithfully represented. "The one thing that fans hate more than being listened to is fan service," Lindelof said, adding, "Fandom is not a monolith. There are some fans who want more risky, edgy sort of revisionist storytelling instead of these adaptations, and some fans who are just basically like, give me what I love." He also made clear that Gunn maintains ultimate control over the larger DCU story, saying that Lantern's writers couldn't venture outside story boundaries established by Gunn. None of this proves Gunn still secretly dislikes Lindelof, nor would it be reasonable to pretend that a filmmaker can't change his opinion of another writer over more than a decade. But the contrast is nevertheless extraordinary. Gunn's criticism wasn't simply that he disliked the ending of Lost. He personally attacked Lindelof's credibility as a storyteller. Scam artist. No integrity whatsoever. A liar. Then, years later, Gunn became co-head of DC Studios and helped entrust that same storyteller with Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart. And Lanterns has now arrived amid controversy precisely because its creators decided to radically alter audience expectations surrounding those characters. Gunn once apparently believed Lindelof had deceived viewers with Lost and lacked integrity as a storyteller. Today, Lindelof is one of the people Gunn entrusted with helping build his DC universe. Whatever happened during those intervening 12 years, Gunn didn't merely change his mind. He handed the supposed liar and scam artist the keys to the Green Lantern Corps.
Who's funding James Gunn?
Yeah. There was a part of me that kind of wondered, is this an elaborate ploy on James Gunn's part to actually prove that Lindelof is a hack? But, and what was funny is that if I'm right about that theory that Hal Jordan isn't really dead and that he reappears in the last episode, it will also prove that he's a liar and a deceiver and a hack. So I guess maybe he is kind of close to Satan. I don't know the guy personally, but It seems to me that from what I've seen so far, Gunn's assessment wasn't far off base.
No, he seems to be pretty accurate with this. Seems like most of the work he's done has been riddled with controversy. I mean, he has
Wait,
worked with J.J. Abrams as well, who's done his fair share of controversy.
let's run with this a little bit. Maybe he's a little like Jigsaw, Sam or James Gunn. I mean,
Gun.
maybe what he really wants. Maybe he doesn't care about the DC universe. Maybe he just wants the money and has decided that he is going to expose all of the people that he hates, and is putting them. It's just like, here you go and do this, and let's just have all of your stuff flop. I don't think that he's that kind of a guy, but it's funny
It
to think
could.
about.
It could. I
I,
mean, like we were talking about with Banta, maybe they just want to see the world burn, or it's not like hurting financially, I would assume, with all the successes they've had. So Gunn, I don't know. It feels weird that almost everything he's done over there has bombed. Plus the inclusion of adding hacks, in his opinion, liars, Satan, to lead something like this. I mean, it does beg the question: does he not have ulterior motives?
I do see a question out in the chat asking, is Kevin still appearing? I have a question for you both. And the answer is, I don't know. Right before we went to air, he did send me a message saying that he was still intending to show up and that he was just running behind. But I did sort of think that he was going to be here by now. So I don't know. It may be that he ran into a complication. I'm still just waiting for him to appear backstage if he's able to make it. But that being said, we should probably get to our main topic for tonight, which is vile villains. You had sort of suggested this as a topic of discussion, and I like it because it lets us go to something that we don't actually talk about all that often, which is that many times a story is only as great as the villain that you produce. And a lot of times, the villains are the most fun to watch. You love to hate a good villain. And sometimes somebody who plays a villain does it so effectively that you start to hate the actor, which I think is one of the best compliments one of those actors can get, unless you hate them because they botched the character. But I thought it was worth a discussion of, okay, why is that? What makes a good villain? What makes a bad villain? What are the different kinds of villains? And what's the best way to deploy a villain? So this was your idea. I'll let you go ahead and lead off. Let's start talking about the concepts before we get to the villains that you pitched. But what do you think it is that makes a good villain, and why is a good villain necessary for good storytelling?
Oh man, both the first question is tough. What makes a good villain? There's so many different examples of good villains out there. It's hard to pinpoint what exactly, but one of the things I've heard over the years too is the more that your villain achieves, the better the story is. The more difficult the hero the more the hero has to overcome. So if the hero or the villain does a great job getting everything done that they need to in the story, it just ups the stakes for the hero to actually come through and hopefully, vanquish it in the end. But there are many different ways that villains can be portrayed. I don't know if you want to go through the categories right now, or if you want to jump into some of the villains as examples. But
We could start with that. The first one that you had brought up was Heath Ledger's Joker.
yeah, this one, probably rated by most people out there to be one of the greatest villains of all time. And the interesting thing about this villain in particular is, like I've been referencing through the night, which is some men just want to see the world burn. And with Heath Ledger's Joker, he's not motivated by money. He's not motivated by the traditional sense of a villain, and he's really hard to relate to. So he's not necessarily the relatable villain. He is in a class on his own, and he is just the mirror image of Batman. he doesn't even want to kill Batman. He wants to just fight Batman for all eternity because that is the interesting thing that he lives for. And also to prove to Batman that human nature at its core is evil. And it's such a fascinating villain, and the way he portrays it is absolutely amazing in this film. I don't know. Do you like this villain, Lorn? Is this one?
Yeah. This is my favorite version of the Joker. Now, part of the reason for that is that when it came to comic books, Batman was my guy. Batman was the comic that I collected. And when you think about it on paper, the pairing of Batman and the Joker does not make sense. They are not what you would consider to be opposites. You have a guy who dresses as a bat and beats people up against a clown. And those images don't exactly go together, but it's not about the images. It is order versus chaos. Batman represents bringing order to Gotham City. And the Joker, what is funny to him is undercutting the Batman's mission, because he's trying to make the case, especially in this movie that we're referencing here, that you're fighting for order for these people because you think that you're good. And I'm trying to make the point that they're all dirty. You're fighting for something that doesn't exist, and I'm going to prove it. And I'm going to unleash chaos, and I'm going to have them do it to prove that your mission is futile. And that's part of why I think that movie is brilliant, because it does something that is not intuitively true. It proves the Joker wrong, because I think, generally speaking, people aren't as good as they think they are. We all like to think of ourselves as being good, but all of us do bad things. All of us are selfish and weak and make a decision based on fear. All of us do that. And in the situation that the Joker puts people in, where there are bombs on these ferries, and each ferry is given a control for the opposite ferry, and you're told either one of you blows up the other or I blow up both, I think a lot of people would pull that trigger. But in the movie, Nolan sets it up to where, for one, I think one of the criminals on the criminal transport boat says, "Give it to me. I'll do what you won't." And you think he's going to pull the trigger, and he takes it, and he just throws it into the water. He says he did what he knew the other guy should have done. And that's the criminal, who you wouldn't expect to do that. And on the other boat, they're all sweating because they know the criminals are on the other boat, and they assume that they're going to pull the trigger too. But they say they haven't pulled it yet, so why should we? You know, they make their decision based on the hope of the goodness of the people that are on the other ferry. And that's actually a bold choice to take. And it proves the Joker wrong. And that's why at the end, when the Joker is expecting the explosion, and he's hanging there and he says, "Do you think that I just wanted to kill you?" It's like, no, we're going to keep doing this forever. That is absolutely what the Joker wants. That is his fantasy. He would be disappointed if the Batman actually broke his rule. He may say that's what he wants, but it's not really. He does want to make him mad. He does want to get him to cross the line when he gets him to beat him up in the police station and he knows he's going too far. Joker loves that. Heath's performance, in my opinion, is the best portrayal of the Joker ever. And Kevin and Marv would take me to task for that. They don't like this performance. This is not their Joker. It's my Joker. And the thing that I love about this type of villain is that when you personify chaos as the metric upon which you are acting as a character, everything becomes unpredictable if written correctly. And when you're dealing with a character that opposes them that is based upon order, they have restrictions that they have to abide by that the villain does not. And they also have to try and put themselves into a mindset that they can't understand. That's why the scene with Alfred is so important when Bruce is asking, what does he want? This doesn't make any sense. And Alfred says, some men just want to watch the world burn. And that's something that if Alfred hadn't said it, Bruce would never have been able to figure it out.
Yeah, he was just trying to logic it out the whole time. Well said, very well said there. And even how the Joker, his one goal is to corrupt the uncorruptible. In his view, that's the most interesting thing he can do at the end of the day, is to corrupt Batman. Like you said, when he goes too far and he's laughing, and there's like, oh, perfectly written, because that could have gone south in so many different ways, but they perfectly wrote it. And this is my favorite version of the Joker as well.
When Batman is just smashing him in the mouth and he's laughing and he's bleeding and he says, you with all your power are powerless. You can do nothing to me, because he doesn't care if he gets beat up. He's winning. Right. And that is so frustrating for Bruce. Yeah. I love the Nolan trilogy. I do think that The Dark Knight Rises has got some flaws, but Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, those two movies are perfect for me. So
I agree. I completely agree. And yeah, like you said, the chaos with him and the unpredictable nature, I think, is one of the elements, but he does have a plan, although he acts like he doesn't. He said, I'm just a stray dog. I don't know what I'd do with a car if I caught one, which I love that line. But that chaos and that unpredictableness with the kind of crazy genius behind him is what makes him such a terrifying villain, and the lengths he's willing to go to prove his point. And that's I think the truly terrifying thing about him and why we love him. And also the underlying element of that was Heath Ledger, the pretty boy, plays this unhinged character so well that takes it up another notch for me.
I have never been more happy to be wrong about a casting.
Yeah.
Because I remember when they announced it, I dreaded that movie. I thought, there is no way this is going to work. What in the world makes you think that Heath Ledger is going to be the Joker? And for me, he became my Joker for life. And it is a tragedy that he died. I really want to know what the third movie would have been if the Joker was still alive. By the way, since we started for this one, I don't know if it released today or if they were just doing additional promotional stuff, but the DC animated first part of Nightfall was, there was an additional trailer that was released today. It's about 10 minutes, and it opens up with, initially it's Azrael going after a bunch of cultists, and then Batman intervenes, and there is a fight between Batman and Azrael, and then it cuts to, in the past, Santa Prisca and the prison Peña Duro and the birth of Bane. It's about 10 minutes, and it looked really good. It looks different than the comics. They're obviously starting in a different way, but I was impressed by what I saw, so if you're interested, check that out. The next villain that you put up on our list was an old mainstay.
Oh, man. Yeah, Darth Vader. One of the most iconic and legendary villains of all time. And it's a little different with this one. Also because you get the original trilogy first, which doesn't really showcase him as a relatable villain in the first three until the end. I'd say the very end of the trilogy with redemption, the redemption arc with him. But then you get the prequels, which adds a whole nother layer of the tragic, relatable downfall of a hero becoming the villain, which is another great line from, that's one of the best lines I love from the Dark Knight movie, is you either live long enough, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. I remember that all the time. Such a great line. So it does play into this here, and how he does as he does become more relatable over time and over the 6 movies as a whole, and how he was so terrifying in the beginning because, again, the unpredictable nature of him, the single-mindedness of Vader, his drive, and just the sheer force of will to get done what he wants to get done was a terrifying villain in the 4, 5, and 6, and then making him relatable in 1, 2, and 3. Now, some people can argue, is that a good move or a bad move? But it does bring another layer of nuance to this character, and it is relatable for everybody to do things for love, or at least to be manipulated to do things supposedly for love. And I like the dichotomy between the two, and even having the original trilogy versus the prequel trilogy, and how it changes and might alter slightly the outlook of this villain. But what's your take on this, Lorn?
This is the classic Greek tragic villain, which is really a tragic hero. And what's fascinating about this to me is that Darth Vader as tragic villain does not work without Luke Skywalker. Because the way the tragic villain works is that they are initially a hero, but they have a tragic flaw. And what makes a villain tragic is that they are unable to overcome that flaw. The flaw becomes their undoing. And so the pain that you feel is the audience is recognizing that this was an extraordinary individual who could have done such good, but for the fact that he could not overcome his tragic flaw. Whereas the hero also has a tragic flaw, but successfully overcomes it. And in Luke's case, that was his impatience, his rashness, his need to dive into action. He had to learn to master that, to overcome his brashness and learn patience, and to be able to govern himself and to discern things in a true way. And in that serve as the example to his father. Now, part of what makes this fascinating is that Vader was never intended to be the big bad, really. He actually initially embodied a different type of villain that we'll talk about in a little bit, which is the muscle-bound thug. He was supposed to be the lieutenant who was there to present an obstacle, but is basically just a blunt force. And it wasn't until The Empire Strikes Back that he actually became the tragic villain in fact, when Lucas decided, you know what, this actually works a lot better if we create this backstory for the character, because initially his idea was kind of similar to what he ended up doing with the prequels, which was that there would just be a series of these Sith Lords that were lieutenants to the Emperor that were each supposed to represent a different obstacle. But that works so much better in the prequels than it would have if they had done it in the original trilogy. And what makes it even more delicious in Star Wars is that even then the tragic villain doesn't really work unless you as the audience understands why he falls. You may recognize that he has a flaw, but you won't empathize with him unless you understand why what he's doing makes sense to him in the moment. Now, modern storytelling has abused this an awful lot by trying to make all villains relatable and say that really they're just misunderstood and they have been abused by society and thus their actions are justified. Vader's actions are never justified. They never say that what you did was understandable and should have been done. They recognize that he repented of those actions at the end, and that he gets a personal redemption even though his actions were still villainous. He actually ends up making the ultimate sacrifice for that to enable him to become a hero in the end. So the dichotomy between those two characters, between Luke and Vader, especially the idea that what I love about the conclusion of Return of the Jedi is in that moment when Vader is so conflicted and he's looking back and forth between Luke and the Emperor. Understand, this is the only tie to Padme that he has. Padme is the one thing that he wanted more than anything else in life, and she's gone. and it's because of his own actions. It's why he's locked in this armor, and he knows that. This is my fault. He looks at Luke, and he sees the example of the Jedi that he wanted to be. When Luke, this is the point when Luke throwing away his lightsaber made sense. When he tosses it aside, when the Emperor tempts him to strike him down, and he says, "No, I'm a Jedi like my father." That's the moment when Anakin wakes up and he sees, this is the man I wanted to be. And this boy, who I can admire for doing what I could not, is looking up to me to do the right thing. And that motivates him to pick up the Emperor, throw away his own life as he tosses him down the reactor shaft. It's beautiful storytelling. I'm not going to claim that George had this in mind all along, because I know he didn't. If you read the various drafts, it's fascinating to see how Lucas creates his characters, because a lot of times he starts off with a bunch of characters as an amalgamation of one guy, and he's putting that guy in there for a specific purpose, but it doesn't quite work. And he starts splitting that one guy into multiple different characters. That's how we got Qui-Gon, too. Because originally Darth Vader was Star Killer, and then later became General Star Killer, and then later a Ben Kenobi style character. Those ended up splitting into two different characters, and so there's all kinds of interesting ways that George create these characters. But when it came to Empire, what the inspiration was, I don't know, but it was a stroke of genius to go, you know what? I can actually make Darth that guy. I can change the whole meaning of this and give Luke an amazing motivation, because that puts his character in real threat. Because Luke has wanted to find his father all these years. He wants to know, what kind of man was my father? He assumes he was a hero. Ben kind of fed him that story that he was. And then to find out that he wasn't, and in fact is the most evil man in the universe, that's going to make Luke walk that dark line, and the audience is going to be nervous for 3 years. And then you show him walking into Jabba's palace in a dark cloak, choking Gamorrean guards, and you go, uh-oh. That's what a good storyteller does. So, rant over. Went a little overboard on that one. Sorry.
No, I love that. That was amazing. Thank you for going into that. That you summed it up perfectly. That is Vader. Oh my.
All right. Our next up. Oh, before we get to that, sir.
Gentlemen, I'm so sorry. I could not just. Technology was not my friend this evening.
It's all right. I am glad that you're here. We are into our villains discussion. We have just covered. Actually, have we got time? Yeah, let's do it. I want to get your takes on these, because I know you'll have a ball with them.
Okay.
We've been talking about villains, what makes a great villain, what type of villain these villains are, why they work against the protagonist, and why it's so delicious to have a good villain. The first one that we discussed. Now, this one, I know, is not your favorite Joker, but you can talk about the Joker as archetype, how you see it, why it works, why you need this kind of villain in the story. Just go nuts with it.
Oh, so yeah, I do enjoy this Joker. The thing I love about The Dark Knight is that it's a movie about it's a movie about balance at the end of the day, and consequences, right? Like, it's Batman is doing this good thing, and he's trying to restore order, and frankly, he's probably being a little too aggressive about it. And there's always a response, right? And then the response is this agent of pure chaos. You know, his motivation is just chaos and mayhem, and whereas Batman takes no joy in his work, this character enjoys being nothing but chaos and pushing Batman to places that he knows nobody else can get them to. This is a villain who is aware that he is the villain, but his motivation is really to just kind of, he's just trying to make a point. Like, he's just trying to prove something at the end of the day. He's not, he's not being a bad guy because he was in some way wrong. It's just, he's like, nope. It's like, you have a point of view. I have a point of view. I think your point of view is incorrect, and I'm going to show you why you're wrong. While also telling you, hey, you decided to go do this thing, and I'm here to show you that there are consequences for your actions. And the only reason is just because he could.
One of the things that I forgot to bring up when we talked about this, and you reminded me, is that part of the brilliance of the story is that Batman is cleaning up the mob in Gotham City, and they don't know how to deal with him. Mm-hmm. So they turn to somebody worse. And in doing so, this is what leads to the freaks coming into Gotham City, because they essentially wipe out and take out the mob operations, and now the costume freaks come in. And that comes straight out of The Long Halloween. That was what they were adapting from. So in trying to clean the city up, Batman actually took out a force that was actually maintaining a kind of order themselves. And he got something worse in response.
It was fascinating. So, my dad loves this movie. My dad loves this movie. He always talks about it from really just an NYPD perspective. He's like, hey, like, this is stuff that actually happens. When we crack down and you get rid and you send the super villains essentially to jail, something always pops up because nature abhors a vacuum. And it's like, but the moral of the story is like, hey, like, you always still have to continue to push and fight back. Like you lose when you don't do anything. I think I know a lot of people have kind of gotten really weird with how we want to treat this movie, all these years later. But I also think the brilliance of the movie is that this is a Batman movie that it's essentially a universal tale. This could just as easily be John McClane as it could be Batman, and the story just works. But I just, in terms of just the kind of villain that this is, it's you have your villain who is so convinced that his actions are right, not necessarily just that they're right. Then you have your revenge villain, and then you have your chaos villain, or just the force of nature villain. And this is what this Joker is. It's just this force of nature that's just an agent of chaos. And I think that those can be very fun villains.
Our next one that we discussed was an old standby.
The tragic villain, right? Especially once you get to the prequels. Old school, folks born before a certain era. Darth Vader was just this evil SOB. For 2 movies, he was the scariest thing that ever could be, right? He is everything you hated about your mean, your mean elementary or middle school teacher or principal. He's the ultimate authoritarian, right? And essentially he's just a machine. You can't bargain with him. He's damn near a Terminator. You can't bargain with him. He knows what he wants. He's coming to get it. And then you get, the prequels come and we get that additional context of now he becomes the villain who was trying to do the right thing, but went about it the wrong way, and became too obsessed with his particular point of view, and in turn kept doing more harm than good. And then you essentially you watch the tragedy of it all, and this as wonderfully a Shakespearean way as possible. You watch the tragedy of it all, and then you get it, and it's all said and done. You're like, yeah, this is a really mean, terrible SOB, but I feel a little bad for him, because if someone had just done the right thing by him and listened, he may not have done this.
I think this is a large part of the reason why the prequels did get a critical reevaluation. Enough time passed that I think people started to see. Lucas, unfortunately, can sometimes be a little ham-fisted.
Mhm.
And I think the prequels initially looked like that because he's pretty blatant about some things. But there is some nuance there that is sometimes a little less obvious than you might think. And over time, people started to read into this and see some of the parallels of other great tragic stories. And Anakin is truly a tragic character because, to be fair, his life was tragedy. He was a slave boy, separated by his mother, taken up by a religious cult who didn't listen to him, and he had real reasons to be upset. It's like he's trying to help people and they're telling him you can't. You can't be personally attached. Well, how is somebody who has been a slave boy that had to rely on other people all his life to survive gonna take that? Especially one who's now in his teens and hormonal and around one of the most attractive women on the planet. It's like, sure, you guys are space monks, but he didn't start off that way.
Yeah, and a woman who's constantly telling, "I don't want you, but look at my cleavage."
Yeah. So this is my I'm not going to be with you outfit.
I'm getting mixed signals.
All
Oh,
right.
my goodness.
Our next villain. This is we're caught up now is Thanos.
Yeah, and Thanos is he dips into a little bit of relatable, like almost every Marvel villain, but I categorize him more as a ideological villain who thinks he's the hero, the one who has a greater purpose in life. Obviously, he's gone through some tragedy of his own, which is the relatable side, but his single determinedness to fix everything for the greater good of the entire universe is why he's the ideological villain, and he will stop at nothing to achieve his goals.
Yeah, I call this villain archetype the zealot. This is the guy who is on a religious crusade, and while personally bothered by what he has to do, will not accept that what he has to do is not necessary. And he will carry it out by any means necessary because he believes it is necessary. And in this case, he's essentially stealing the power of a god to accomplish his end. Now, you don't always go that broad brush. You can do a zealot character and just have it be local table stakes instead of ending the entire universe, and it still works because there are people that take things to that extreme. That's how you get people in real life like the Unabomber, somebody who sits in their home and writes a manifesto and mails it to people and hurts people because they think that it's necessary to bring attention to their cause.
Yeah.
Thanos is the lesson in what happens when he shows you the difference between principles and dogma, right? He is so rigid in his convictions that he doesn't realize that his plan doesn't make a lick of sense anyway. But he's got to do it, right? What I enjoy the most about Thanos is we see two versions of this character, right? Because really the Infinity War Thanos is, he has the maturity of age, right? He's kind of zen about this whole thing. This is something I got to do. No one else has the ability to do it, but he's not really behaving with malice. But then you get Endgame Thanos. And that is just a beast of a different color. That is not only am I going to do this, how dare you? How dare you interfere in my plans? I'm gonna make sure this hurts. And that is a rage monster. So the zealot character, the zealot villain is always, I do think they're always fun to see. Again, False of Doom and Conan, when you watch them collide with a hero who is also steadfast in their beliefs, but has the gift of perspective and context, and is willing to listen to the opinion of others so that they don't go down that path. It's always a nice, it creates a nice compare contrast moment for you, where, because sometimes when you look at it, like, you're dealing with two of the same character. Another one that's great is Khan and Kirk. They're really mirror images of each other. Kirk is the man of action. He's intelligent, but he's a man of action. He's driven by his beliefs, but he has a belief in a greater system and righting wrongs. And Khan is steadfast in his beliefs of he's superior. And because he's superior, he knows better. And he's doing these terrible, awful things for your own good. You're too stupid to know that what I'm trying to do is the good thing for you. I guess really, who would Thanos? I guess you're supposed to look at it through Tony. But I guess when you break down the big three, Thanos is a reflection of all three characters. Because Thanos has the intellect and the arrogance, so there's this reflection of Tony. The steadfast conviction, it would be Steve, and then the unrelenting power would be Thor. But it's a fascinating twisted mirror image of the main characters.
Yeah, and the interesting part too is that he is willing to accept the ultimate end for himself, to take responsibility for his actions at the end of it all, knowing that he has to do this thing as the Zealot.
I personally would have liked if we stuck to more comic book accurate Thanos.
I was going to ask you about that. Do you think the villain works better with the motivation of winning the affection of Lady Death?
Yes, because you don't change too much about the essence of the character. He is like he's still steadfast in his convictions, however twisted they are. Instead of it being a demented a demented vision, a demented version of certainty, it's a demented, twisted version of love, which is also another fantastic motivator for villains, where they're taking this thing that is pure, but they've ruined it, they perverted it, they tainted it. It's a broken reflection of what it's supposed to be.
I do think that pushes him closer to Vader territory than Zealot territory.
Maybe they're avoiding that for that reason.
Our next villain, I think, actually embodies the archetype of the thug. This is the lieutenant character. This is the one that is there to be an unrelenting force against the protagonist. Other characters like this would be the Terminator. It's just the thing that will not stop. It's not necessarily a mastermind. It's not the head honcho, but it is the very big obstacle that you have to overcome to be able to get to the big bad.
Yeah, it's kind of a reversal in some ways of Batman and the Joker. He's for order. He doesn't want chaos. He wants things to be in its place. He despises the human race, as a whole. So that motivation to bring order to chaos is the reverse side of things. But it's fascinating to see as his unrelenting drive is kind of scary in its own right, that somebody's always after you no matter what.
And then as the character evolves, and you get the twisted reflection, or the yin to the yang. I think this is why Smith was just so much fun. He had all the resources, he had the means, he had the unrelenting drive, and then you really see like this cold machine at the end of the day, at times, is more human in his behavior than the human character he's trying to stop. Especially when he's having that conversation with Morpheus in the first movie, and he is just venting his frustration. And like, wait, you're frustrated? And then you realize he wants to get out. So he's frustrated with his situation. He hates his job.
There is some relatability there.
Yeah. Oh man.
Our next one is a fun one.
Oh.
Now, I chose the Jared Harris picture from the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies. I did not like the first Sherlock Holmes movie, but I loved the second one. And Jared Harris's Moriarty became my favorite villain of that year, particularly in the end fight scene, because what they had done so brilliantly in those movies was you got to see the way Holmes' mind worked, where he would extrapolate what is the best way to actually execute this fight so that it is carried to my desired conclusion in the most efficient way possible. But Moriarty also has that ability. And the key scene in that movie is they're sitting across each other at a table, and you see both of them doing the same thing. And ultimately, I think it's Holmes just decides, you know what? I'm just going to carry you right over the balcony.
Yeah.
Which is also true to the novel. But Harris represented the evil mastermind in such a delicious way. This is the movie that made me an incredible fan of Jared Harris. Also great in Mad Men. He's been in lots of other stuff. The guy is a phenomenal actor, lives right up to his father's reputation, but the evil mastermind is one of my favorite kind of villains. Now, there's two ways to do the evil mastermind. You can do the brilliant kind like this, or the completely inept kind like Skeletor. But masterminds are my favorite kind of villain because, generally speaking, they're the ones that don't really have a motivation. They just enjoy it. Mm-hmm. They like being the mastermind, and they're having so much fun doing it. And part of the reason for that is usually because, in the case of the brilliant mastermind, they don't have an opponent usually that's operating on their level. And they're so happy when they finally find somebody that can execute at their level. Now they've got someone to play with. Another one would be the Riddler. The Riddler is also that kind of a character because he wants everybody to see how brilliant he is. And he keeps getting humiliated by Bats because Bats is just that much more brilliant.
Yeah, I like how you said somebody to play a game with, and the genius of the end of that film with them playing chess was such a brilliant move on the directors and the writers and everything like that, because it just showcased the brilliance of both of them, and also the fact that this villain type, it's not very relatable for normal people, but it does give you an interesting introspective look as to see, if I were a villain, would I do something like that? I think that's why villains in some ways speak to us, because generally speaking, we're all good people, not thinking about evil things. And it's fascinating as a concept, villains and their intentions behind things, and how we can look at, oh, okay, that's one way to do it, I guess. But I do love this archetype as well. It's one of the it's an older one, but it's just been a staple for so long that it's fun to watch on screen for sure.
Yeah, this was brilliant. I really enjoy this movie even today. And I do really enjoy there's different versions of the Dark Reflection, right? Like it's the Flash, Reverse Flash, what else we got? Spider-Man, Venom, blah blah blah. Everything that we always get in the comic book movie. The sequel is always it's the same character, but this one's bad. The
Mirror Universe, Kirk and Spock.
Yes. The what I love about this is this version is the what happens if your character doesn't have standards, or that can't control his more base impulses, right? Because at the end of the day, Moriarty and Holmes are essentially the same character, and what's driving Moriarty is I have a brand new. Oh, Wilson, I even think in the Moffat version, he does an excellent job at this too. Of Moriarty is so happy that he has someone that he can go toe to toe with, but then he also is not satisfied because there's someone who's on his level and no one is on his level. So now he's spending the entire movie proving that he's better than the only person who can actually truly understand him. And where they're truly different is that moral code. Holmes is not going to. Holmes will torture poor Watson and tell him that he's a dullard, and play, and go on a drug-induced rampage and play some bad music. But he's not going to murder a whole bunch of people and be the impetus behind the start of an entire world war. Just because. Just because.
I think this is also the villain archetype that probably for actors is the most fun to play, because generally this is the one that you get to chew the scenery and be flamboyant and just revel in being evil. And I think that they are the most fun to play. I think they're the most fun to watch. This is also where you get Grand Admiral Thrawn from. It's the same type of a character, although in Thrawn's case, you take the emotion away. He is just strictly analytical. So one of my very favorite villainous archetypes. I did want to bring this one in. You sort of touched on it already. You jumped ahead of the pack a little bit, but we couldn't do the villains episode without talking about this guy.
Khan Noonan. Khan. This character is great because he actually touches on a little bit of everything. He's tragic. He's also intellectually superior. He is a scruples and morals not devoid, but slightly off versus versus our heroes. Like I think one of the best moments in Space Seed is Kirk and the crew. They're just like marveling at how brilliant this character is, and just how intelligent he is, and how charismatic and how powerful. And the Spock goes, "Hey, this guy was a genocidal maniac. What are you doing?" And then they kind of begrudgingly go, "Yeah, you know what? You're right." And then 5 minutes later, he takes over the ship and starts executing people. He's also the consequences character because Kirk makes a promise. "Hey, I'm going to check on you and make sure everything's going okay." And he leaves him there, and then this terrible thing happens, and everybody that he loves dies a horrible death, and all he can do is just, he essentially becomes Ahab in pursuit of in his proverbial white whale. And now that I'm old enough to understand that Star Trek 2 is just Moby Dick, it makes it that much of a better story for me. But this is blind wrath, and revenge is all consuming, and the dangers of arrogance and hubris, and Khan is so I think Khan is I think this version of Khan is just one of the greatest movie villains that you could have ever gotten. He was powerful enough that your lead characters, your main protagonist, your main antagonist, don't ever have to physically come to blows. It was just a battle of wits, and the only reason the good guys survive is experience. They just had a little more experience.
One of the things that I have a problem with Wrath of Khan, it's a small thing, but it's always bothered me. when they enter the system and they beam down, how do you not notice an entire planet in this solar system is missing? That seems to me like something seems to be off. How do you not recognize that we're actually beaming down to an entirely different planet than we thought we were? But I understand. You wouldn't have the movie if you didn't do that. But Khan is a fascinating villain. But I think because he embodies, you're right about wrath, but he also has that intellect of the Moriarty, where and he losing his wife. I think honestly, had he not lost his wife on the planet when it encountered its devastation, I'm not certain that he would have reacted to Kirk the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But because he lost his wife and he had his shot to take his revenge, that was all it was going to be after that. He was a dog on a bone, and it was not going to stop until one or the other was finished. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I like about The Wrath of Khan is it's Kirk's exploration of his own mortality. Mm-hmm. He is feeling old at the start of that movie and washed up and like there's nothing more for him. And at the end of it, he has discovered that he has this son. He's reforged a relationship, although that doesn't last. He's ready to be back as the captain on the bridge, and he's no longer the admiral behind the desk. So,
see, the other thing I love about Khan is that he's also kind of contradictory in his nature, right? Like, this is a man who is he is a savage at heart, but there is undeniable elegance and nobility in his terrible actions. So it just makes him that much more fascinating, nuanced. Like, I think this is this in terms of how you build this character, he is the essentially the embodiment of nuance. Because if you turn him into the mustache twirler, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And then if you subdue his emotion, it also doesn't work. So you kind of need that over the top, that over the top performance that Ricardo Montalban gives, while also still striking that chord of no, like this is a guy that I can have a very thoughtful intellectual conversation with, probably even debate, and we can shake hands and walk away. But there's just this one thing that he can't let go of, and he'll be damned if you don't afford him the opportunity to alleviate this burden off of his soul.
It's like the perfect combination of almost all the villains that we talked about before this, to your point there. The nuance of all these different things with the tragedy, but his zealotness for the one thing he wants to do. He's unpredictable. He could be chaotic at times, but also refined, and is also a mastermind. It really is the culmination of all of it.
The one thing I would push back about is you sitting down and having a conversation with him. I agree with you, you could do that. But the difference between him and the mastermind is that the mastermind is thrilled that he has somebody that's operating on his level. Khan recognizes there's nobody on his level. You're having a conversation with him. He's entertaining an insect. And the problem is, you having the conversation with him don't realize that he's regarding you that way. He's actually deigning to notice you and secretly has contempt for you while he's sitting there making refined conversation and sipping on his brandy. So couldn't close out the villain discussion without discussing Khan. Anyway, that's the villains that we were going to talk about tonight. I love talking about villains. You don't have a great story without a great villain. We do have one super chat to get to before we close it out. That is from Liquid Fox for 10 Canadian saying, I got Star Wars Shadows of the Empire for N64 and was wondering your thoughts on it. I like it, but have no idea how lore accurate it is, and I never hear people talk about it. For villains, the T-1000. So I didn't play the N64 version. I played the PC version. There's not really much functional difference between the gameplay. It's primarily in the cutscenes and how they were rendered. To the books, it's... How do I talk about it? It's accurate-ish. It's got scenes from the books, but it's obviously truncating a lot of stuff and changing how some things shake out. If you really want to get the Shadows of the Empire experience, you need to read the book. But in its broad points, it's accurate. The distinction for Shadows of the Empire for me, personally, was that was the first computer game I ever played that required a 3D video card, and I didn't have one. So I had to go out and buy one. And this is back during the day. These are the days when it actually acted as a pass-through card. So you daisy-chained your video cards to get the 3DFX. And at the time, that seemed so stupid to me. I didn't understand, why do I need 2 video cards? What is this really giving me? Shadows of the Empire answered that question. What it gave was, first of all, much smoother polygons. You were getting much anti-aliasing on a level that you hadn't seen before, but more importantly than that, transparency. Water was actually translucent. So was fog. And that was such an amazing effect. And there's a couple of levels that use it to great effect in the PC version of Shadows of the Empire. I don't think that you got those effects on the N64. I may be wrong. So it may be worth checking that out just to see what those early 3D effects looked like. But other than that, it's a fine game. But it's not a truly accurate version of the novel. So there you go.
I played that game on N64, actually. I grew up on that game. That was one of my first games to play, and it was in Star Wars especially. And I do remember fog on there. So there's definitely fog. I don't remember the water quite as much, but I love that game. Lore-wise, it's not a huge lore thing, but it's fun enough and keeps you entertained as you're going. And there's some really challenging levels in there.
If you were to play it today, it's pretty clunky. It's not going to be the same experience that it was like when we played it back in '96. But one of the cool things about it was that the Shadows of the Empire experience was an entire multimedia project, and they released all kinds of merchandise for it. The concept behind Shadows of the Empire was that this was the first story that Lucas allowed that was between the actual movies, and so they wanted to treat it as though it were a movie with everything but the movie. So you could get action figures, statues, trading cards, posters, action figures, vehicle play sets. But the most fun thing for me was they released a soundtrack for the book, and it was by Joel McNeely. It's not the same stuff as John Williams' music. It's a different style, but he had done a lot of the composing for the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, and Lucas liked him, so they pitched that to him. The opening is one of my very favorite tracks because it blends the Star Wars opening theme with returning in a dream sequence for Leia to the carbon freezing chamber as Han is being encased in carbonite. There's another great one that is called Night Skies, that is a scene in the book where Luke is actually on Coruscant and Vader is there and they sense each other. And there's something of a mental conversation, or not conversation in the sense of words, but feelings that are expressed between them. And you have their musical themes interplaying with each other in this track. It's absolutely beautiful. Also, the theme for the villain, Prince Shizor, is this frenetic, almost kind of I don't know if it's a tango, but it's a waltz. It becomes a waltz that becomes a frenetic, almost insane waltz by the end of it. No, I'm sorry. That's when he's seducing Princess Leia. That's a different track. His track just trust me. If you haven't heard the soundtrack, go get the Shadows of the Empire soundtrack. It's very much worth it. And yes, I would recommend that you read the novel if you haven't read it. And it also happens to be on my YouTube channel. That's one of the novels that I've read. So if you want to listen to it, I've read it. So go look for me there at Lorn Connor 9030 on YouTube if you want to listen to it. Guys, do you have anything that you want to pitch before we get out of here for the night?
For me, just we got another show coming up this Wednesday. Tomorrow, we're gonna be talking Zero Company and Star Wars games. Actually, oddly enough, we're talking about Star Wars games tomorrow, and then we're having a special guest live for members only on Thursday. Hope that's okay if I plug it a little bit here, Lorn.
But, absolutely. I know your guest is really looking forward to it.
Oh, good. I was hoping so. Yeah, you will be on our show, members only, this Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then we'll be releasing the full interview the following week. So we're really excited about that.
Kevin, what do you got coming up?
Oh, I've got my Best Damn Wrestling show in a couple of weeks here at a wonderful Fontana Dam. We got a Hall of Famer Ricky Morton, one half of the Rock and Roll Express, NXT superstar Bull James, and one half of the Good Brothers, Doc Gallows, will be here. And I think maybe the son of AJ Styles, Avery Styles, will be here. So it should be a really good show. It's going to be our hopefully the first of many, but, we're trying some different things here to bring some new fresh energy over to the resort. And I'm looking forward to it. As tiring as this whole endeavor has been, I'm really looking very forward to it. Outside of that, I was just reminiscing over spending my entire Christmas vacation in the winter of '96 playing Shadows of the Empire, and then going, "Oh, you guys changed the ending. That's pretty neat."
Yeah, it actually was kind of neat because he did pop up later. All right, folks, that's going to be it for us tonight. We will be returning on Friday evening. We don't have the show topic actually mapped out yet, but we'll get there. Hope you guys all have a great week until then, and we'll see you on Friday.
The bell rings every morning. It's off to school and work. Waiting for some fun while my boss acts like a jerk. Pro show afternoons. Midnight's edge can't come too soon. The afternoon's edge can't come too soon. But at night I'm filled with dread. I know just what I'll do instead. Come on and follow me. It's time you see for Lorn and Apollo. Time to laugh and learn. Come feel the burn of what the fandom was. What random fun doesn't escape. Isn't it great? Late night with Lorn and Apollo.